our lack of respect and understanding the importance of symbols. I won't harp on that too much. But religion really does understand the importance of symbols. And this bumper sticker makes absolutely no sense if you don't understand the symbol behind it. Christianity, where would Christianity be without its symbols? Lenny Bruce once joked that if Jesus had been killed 20 years ago, Catholic school children would be wearing little electric chairs around their necks instead of crosses. It's funny, but it's also true. Symbols are important. So important to religion that they actually co-opt the symbols of religions that they're trying to take over. They stole the symbol of the Christmas tree. It was a symbol of undying life in the darkest winter. The pagans that they were trying to assimilate. They stole the celebration of the winter solstice. Really good Christmas. They stole the celebration of spring and rebirth. And they now symbolize, what do eggs have to do with Christianity? They have to do with fertility. What do rabbits have to do with Christianity? They also have to do with fertility. They're legendary for their procreative abilities, right? And then Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox. Is that pagan or what? So they assimilated these symbols precisely because they were so important to the people they were trying to convert. Governments understand the importance of symbols. Flags, uniforms, titles, huge imposing government edifices. All these are symbols of government power and legitimacy. Companies have made symbols into a science. It's called branding. And then successful movements understand the importance of symbols as well. Symbols can communicate in an instant what it can take a whole book to communicate. They represent not just an idea, but a whole identity. And some atheists are beginning to understand the importance of symbols. Richard Dawkins understands that, and that's why he's adopted the Scarlet Letter Day as the out campaign. Got one right here. Highly recommend everybody get one. One of my favorite writers, Greta Christina, once asked in an article about these very same small violations, are these the most pressing problems facing our nation? No, of course not. They're not even the most pressing problems facing the atheist movement, but that doesn't make them trivial. Symbolic issues can have a significant impact. Segregated drinking fountains and lunch counters weren't the most pressing problems facing the civil rights movement. She's absolutely right. These small violations symbolize a disrespect for the separation of church and state. And another more insidious purpose lies behind them. They tell all non-adherents, non-Christians, that you're not true citizens. They tell us that this is a Christian nation, with a Christian government, and that we're merely tolerated by the Christian majority. If you remember what Thomas Paine said about both tolerance and intolerance in the rights of man, he said that both are despotisms. The one assumes to itself the right of withholding the liberty of conscience, the other of granting it. So these symbols communicate a privileged status of believers. They're the broken windows that the religious are using to stake a claim on their territory, like a dog in a new neighborhood full of firefighters. They're putting up their symbols to show that this nation belongs to them, and we have to challenge them. Now, if you're still not convinced, I want to look at a couple of cases. In 2005, the Supreme Court handed down two decisions that encapsulate the symbolism and the legal problem of allowing these violations to pass unchallenged. Both cases involved public displays of the Ten Commandments on government property. The first case from Prairie County involved Ten Commandments displays that had recently gone up in two county courthouses. The Supreme Court struck those displays down, said the courthouses had to remove them. That very same day, the Supreme Court decided Van Orden versus Perry, Perry as in Rick Perry, governor of Texas, and it involved this monument. That's the Texas State Capitol right behind it. That's the monument, again, staking their claim on their territory. And in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court upheld that monument. Now, the swing vote was Justice Breyer. Justice Breyer changed his mind because 40 years have passed in which this monument was unchallenged. Those 40 years indicate that nobody thinks it's a religious monument. This is basically what he was saying. And incidentally, Breyer was wrong in history. It was challenged. FFRF wrote a number of letters about this. Other groups challenged it, and the Attorney General was actually asked to issue an opinion on the validity of the monument and if it was invalid to take it down. But all of those letters and all of those requests were ignored. So this decision is not only based on bad legal reasoning, but bad history. And I told Pryor that when I wrote to him recently for an amicus brief in another case involving government prayer, which you can read on our website. But basically, the monument's allegedly 40 years of peaceful history show that the non-religious aspects of the monument dominate, despite I, the Lord thy God, you shall have no other gods before me, being right there in big letters at the top. And the court actually decided another case on very similar grounds. In 1983, they decided Marsh versus Chambers. And that case upheld legislative prayer. So prayer before a state legislature actually convenes was held acceptable because it had been going on since before the First Amendment existed. So figure that one out. It comported with the First Amendment because they were doing it before there was a First Amendment. Okay, the second example I want to talk about is another small law that FFRF is challenging in federal court right now. And this will show you, too, that we also take on things that are more than symbolic, even though that is incredibly important. This law was passed in 1953. This is right around the time that godless, atheistic communism is threatening the U.S. It's the same time that our pledge was tainted with God. It's the same time that our money was tainted with God, at least the paper money. And it's the same time that the National Day of Prayer was foisted on us. The law was passed by Representative Peter Mack, and he wrote up the law that in these times of godless and anti-religious world movement, we should basically reward ministers of the gospel, for carrying on their fight against this foe. This is how the law works. Everybody pays income tax. But some things don't count as income. So if you're a student, you have student loans, those don't count as income. You can work and make $5,000, you get $10,000 in student loans, that's $15,000 of income. But the government's only going to tax you on $5,000. The parsonage exemption does something very similar for housing for ministers of the gospel. So they can get a tax benefit in one of two ways. First, if the church actually owns a house, and you live in that house as a minister of the gospel, you're getting a benefit. You don't have to pay rent, you don't have to pay mortgage payments, so this is rent-free. It's actually a benefit you're getting, but we're not going to charge you income tax on that benefit. And the second part is that the church can give you a salary, and they can say, this salary is a housing allowance, and all of that is excludable from income. So if the church pays you $80,000 and says that $80,000 is for housing, you make no income that year. So that's how it works. And FFRF challenged this law. The first argument that the government raised was, hey, we've been doing this for 60 years, come on. They actually have an expert history witness testifying about how long it's been going on. So again, another example of how it started off small and went unchallenged. And it started off small, but now it's really about McMansion. So this data for Jim and Tammy Faye Baker is a little bit old. It's from the 1980s, so you need to mentally adjust these figures for inflation and 1980s taste. So Jim and Tammy Faye were televangelists, and they lived in a $1.3 million waterfront home owned by the ministry. And they paid him a housing allowance of $2,000 a month in addition to the home. The mansion featured 3 kitchens, a fish-shaped pool, 25 closets, Italian white marble floors, white silk wallpaper, a $5,000 Christmas tree that included hand-blown glass ornaments, a $26,000 garage, an $140,000 renovation of the kitchen, a $93,000 closet that was 15 by 18 feet, an $8,500 water slide that was never completed, a $5,900 playhouse for their children that was equipped with electricity and heat, and a $600 shower curtain for their daughter. We're paying for that. Another televangelist, Creflo Dollar. The New York Times reported in 2006 that Mr. Dollar's Rolls Royces, private jets, $1 million Atlanta home, and $2.5 million Manhattan apartment furnish proof of the validity of his teachings, which is the prosperity gospel. He collects $345,000 a month for this church and about $4 million annually. Kenneth Copeland. He has an 18,000 square foot residence. Nice watch, too. This is owned by his church. It's situated on 25 acres. It's completely tax exempt. As of the year 2008, it was valued at over $6 million. The parsonage has a sweeping spiral staircase and a bridge that spans across the living room to connect the two sides of the house, because that's what you need. Crystal chandeliers, and according to his wife, doors that came from a castle. It's got a private airport with all of